Death at Devil's Bridge. Chapter 27. Behold, I shew you a mystery. Corinthians lines 15, verse 51. Light refreshments Lady Catherine had ordered, and Sarah Pratt had been hard at it all afternoon, with only a few moments out for tea and a biscuit with Bess, who had seemed to have forgotten her animosity, although she had made a remark about tongues that ran on a bit too long. In truth, Sarah was glad that her friend had been exonerated of nearly all misdeeds. It had been wrong of Bess to conceal the jar of ointment in the gondola, and very wrong to lay a curse upon the motor car, although, of course, there could be nothing at all to the curse, so perhaps that did not even count. But whatever Bess's faults, she seemed to have redeemed herself by revealing the secrets of her ointment, although why Lady Catherine and Sir Charles should take such an interest in a foolish business like that, Sarah did not for the life of her understand. And having told Lady Catherine about the squire's removal of the grapnel, she certainly felt easier in her spirit. Whipple could not be blamed for what he had not done, and perhaps Sir Charles could make the squire own up to it. In the event, Sarah was happily at work, sailing back and forth from the stolid, predictable iron range to the skittish gas cooker, snapping orders to the kitchen maids, and feeling that she was once again mistress of all that she surveyed. Lady Sheridan's light refreshments were to include a sliced cold joint, a cold turbot, placed white side up, and garnished with caviar and green mayonnaise, an ornament salmagundi salad that showed off its colourful layers in a straight-sided crystal bowl, small sandwiches cut into shapes and prettily decorated, a moulded strawberry jelly, several hot and cold savouries and fruit. It was the first meal in weeks that Sarah felt confident of producing without mishap, and all because her iron range had been restored to her, and peace and harmony to the kitchen. Entertainment. Sir Charles had announced for the evening and put Lawrence in charge of the preparations. Lawrence had spent most of the afternoon in the dark room preparing lantern slides from various negatives, some of which had been taken by Miss Marston, others by Sir Charles. The preparation of the slides was made much simpler by the enlarging camera that Sir Charles had recently purchased. Lawrence enjoyed his dark-room work, especially now that he was relieved of the guilty burden that had so oppressed him this morning. Knowing that the Daimler had not crashed because he had siphoned out most of the petrol, but because someone else had smeared grease on the brake, he could turn his mind to other matters, to the present work, although he had become so adept at it that it hardly required any special attention, and to the future, his and Amelia's future, for which he must now construct some sort of plan. With the Daimler wrecked and Lord Bradford gone off to London, it did not seem so likely that Lawrence would be summoned thence. But that was not the end of it. His greatest hope had been the prospect of being employed by Sir Charles at Bishop's Keep. But if that could not be, he would have to go find work elsewhere. How far would he have to go? What would he have to do? If he had to travel as far as Colchester, 15 miles away, to find employment, it would mean a choice between Amelia's going along and giving up her situation and the cottage, or his living for the week in Colchester and seeing her only on Sundays and holidays. But Lawrence did not have to puzzle over these problems for too many hours. He finished mounting the slides and took them out for Sir Charles to inspect. Constable Lakin had gone, and they were alone. "Thank you, Lawrence," Sir Charles had said. "I have taken several more photographs. Here are the dark slides for you to develop and make into more lantern slides. When you have finished, we can turn our attention to preparations for the evening." Sir Charles," Lawrence said hesitantly, "if you have a moment, I've somewhat to ask you, sir." Sir Charles looked up from the lantern slides he was examining. "What is it?" "It's about work, sir." Lawrence was not accustomed to speaking humbly, but he did his best. "It seems that Lord Bradford will not be needing my services now that the motor car is no more. I've been hoping, that is, Amelia and I, He stopped and cleared his throat and blurted it out. "Truth be told, Sir Charles, I'd rather work for ye, and Amelia and I would rather stay at Bishop's Keep than go to London. I know I can be useful with the gas plant and the electric and the photographing and such," he added hurriedly, feeling that he was placing too much stress on what he and Amelia wanted, rather than on what they had to offer. "And of course Amelia is helpful to her ladyship. If you can see any way to clear to allowing us to stay here, sir, we'd be most grateful and work very hard." Sir Charles put down the slide and regarded him thoughtfully for a moment. "I have been thinking of purchasing a motor car for Lady Catherine. I could take care of it for you, sir." Lawrence burst out eagerly. "You'd never have to worry about her safety. With me taking care of it, and I could keep the gas plant and the electric, and Yes, I dare say you could do all those things, and quite handily too. And in fact, Lord Bradford has already asked me my help in finding you another place. If you would prefer to work here, I think we have discovered a happy solution to both problems. Lawrence felt himself beaming from ear to ear, so full of ecstasy that he could scarcely contain himself. "Oh, sir, thank you, sir. Amelia would be overjoyed, and I dare say the arrangement will be to all of our advantages," Sir Charles said. "Now, head back to work. Let's finish up with the slides, and then we shall set up for tonight's entertainment. Oh, and by the by, ask Mutt to step in here, will you? I've written notes that must go immediately to the coroner and to the doctor as well." Mrs. Pratt's light refreshments, which were set out on the dining table and eaten standing in the latest London fashion, were received with surly cheer, but consumed, Kate observed, with a more ready relish. The conversation, however, rather lagged, Ponsonby, Bateman, and Dixon occasionally speaking to one another, but never to Dunstable. Dunstable, resplendent in an embroidered purple vest, was speaking to no one but Charles, and Rolls failing miserably in his few attempts at wit. Charles himself seemed engrossed in his thoughts and ate and drank hurriedly, and then disappeared. The only guests who seemed to enjoy an amiable conversation were Vicar Talbot, Coroner Hodson, Dr. Bassett, and Squire Thornton, and of course Patsy and Kate, the two ladies. Thornton, who had been watching Patsy with an avid eye, made several attempts to speak to her, but each time she avoided him. Promptly at 8, after a murmured message from Mutt, Kate clapped her hands. "Sir Charles promised an evening of photographic entertainment," she said. "It is ready, if you would care to adjourn to the drawing-room." "Lantern slides," Bateman muttered to Ponsonby. "They had better not be photographed of somebody's trip to the Holy Land, or I will tell you I shall leave." "It will take more than an evening's amusement to wash out the taste of the weekend's woes," Ponsonby agreed. He cast a nervous eye in the direction of Harry Hodson. "But I fail to see why that fellow is here. The coroner, isn't he?" Kate spoke lightly, as if she had caught just the last question. "Harry Hodson? He's a dear old friend and a great admirer of Sir Charles' photographic work." "Indeed," Hodson said, coming up. "I am most eager to see what our wizard has been up to with his camera lately, Lady Catherine. I have always enjoyed his revelations of photographic mysteries." "A documentation of this weekend's events, I'm told," the vicar has said. "The balloon ride and the chase. And including," the doctor added, joining them, "some lantern slides of the Daimler's wreckage. Most appalling, I'm told. Not for the faint of heart." He frowned a little at Kate. "Perhaps not for the ladies either." Kate gave him a smiling shrug. "Ah, well," Bateman said, with more interest, and even Ponsonby now looked curious. In the drawing-room, Kate saw that Lawrence had set up the lantern screen with several rows of chairs facing it. Charles stood at the rear of the chairs, his projecting lantern on a small table and a box of slides beside it. The lantern was of the double lens type, consisting of two optical tubes arranged one above the other. It enabled the projectionist to dissolve one photographic image into another, superimpose two images, or cast two images upon the screen simultaneously, one above the other. "What is he going to do?" Patsy whispered curiously, as she and Kate took seats in the back row. "I can't really say," Kate said. "He was too busy this evening to confide all the details to me, but if things go as he wishes, I suspect the entertainment will tend more to high drama than just to light amusement." When the guests were all settled in their chairs, Kate relaxed, curious to see how Charles would handle the presentation. She had no doubts about his skill, of course, but he would be dealing with men of a rather volatile temper. She was glad that the coroner and the doctor were there, and the constable not far away. Charles signalled to Mutt to turn out all but one of the lights, and then spoke. "The weekend has been a memorable one, gentlemen. I thought you might enjoy seeing pictures of its more interesting moments. The first few shots I will show you were taken in the park yesterday by Miss Patsy Marston, an excellent photographer." He threw a slide onto the screen. "Mr. Bateman, I believe." "That is me, all right," Bateman said, grinning at the picture of him standing beside a tree, smoking a cigarette and watching as other drivers laboured to start their cars. "See how easy it is to start an electric. Push of a button is all it takes. No crawling, no cranking." "But don't forget where it ended," Ponsonby said with a snicker. "At the end of a tow rope." A ripple of laughter went through the group. Charles inserted several slides, one after the other, of the waiting motorcars and the feed activities as they got on the way, and the balloon, surrounded by curious spectators, ready to go up. "Ah!" Rolls exclaimed with satisfaction. "Isn't she beautiful? A work of art." And here is one of our departure, Charles said with a little laugh. Under duress, as it were, we were being pursued by natives armed with pitchforks. He put off a slide of himself and rolled, scrambling into the balloon, while the ground crew held the mooring ropes. And another, Thornton, I believe this is a picture of you. The slide was met by a momentary silence. Then, as the stunned audience took in the significance of the scene, gasps and murmurs were heard. Why, it is you, Roger, the coroner exclaimed in a gruff amazement. Pulling the grapnel free, why in heaven's name would you do a thing like that? Bless me, Harry, you're right, the doctor said loudly and incredulous. He nudged Thornton, who was sitting between them. You sly dog, Roger, so that's why you stood poor Wable's bail. You don't want to see the poor man suffer for something that you did. The coroner leaned forward to speak to the doctor across Thornton. Well, I don't suppose I'm surprised, Bassett. I told you that Mrs. Jessup has finally revealed that it was our squire here, not Miss Rose, who paid the Jessups that mysterious £30. The doctor became suffused with astonishment. Roger, I am utterly astounded. Why in the world? Thornton jumped to his feet. I had nothing to do with it, he shouted. Not any of it. He pointed at the screen. That picture is a fake. It is not, Patsy replied with dignity. I took the photograph with my Freena and developed it myself, and that is you, Squire Thornton. The camera caught you red-handed. Her eyes narrowed and her voice became steely. Telegrams may lie, sir, but not photographs. The squire turned and looked at Kate and Patsy. He was about to speak, but their words seemed to have robbed him of any kind of power. He started to stumble over the doctor's feet as if making to leave, but the coroner took one arm and the doctor the other and pushed him back into the chair. I think, Roger, the coroner said sternly, that you had better stay. Indeed, said the doctor, I'm sure there is more to be revealed. On a happier note, Charles said, putting up the next slide, here are the winners of the chase. Informal winners, of course. This slide of Kate and Patsy, who posed and rolled Peugeot, laughing and waving at the camera, was greeted by the three drivers with grunts and discontented shufflings. Congratulations, ladies, said the vicar. I must confess to a great admiration for anyone who could manhandle one of those machines through our terrible lanes. Sheer luck that they got that far, Dixon muttered. Oh, I don't know, said Charles mildly, putting up another slide of the two ladies, this one posed with rolls and Farmer Styles in front of the inflated balloon. There was quite a bit of skill involved, not to mention strength and good judgment. I'd say, said Rolls, 3 3/4 horsepower, you know. Frankly, I'm amazed that a woman could manage it. Lady Catherine, you have my greatest respect. Kate was about to respond to this, but Charles had gone on to the next slide. And here is the car that came closest to finishing, he said, and put up a picture of a dejected Bateman, his disabled electric, and the tow horse, its lips pulled back from its teeth in a malevolent horse laugh. Ha! Laughed Ponsonby. Bateman, what a fool you look. This picture demonstrates, Dunstable said pompously, precisely why electricity cannot be taken seriously as an automotive fuel. Petrol is the only viable propellant. But Bateman's electric did go farther than the steamer or the Benz, Kate pointed out. That's true, Gerald replied. Unfortunately, we do not have pictures of the flock of geese that caused Mrs. Ponsonby to come to grief, or the stump that did the Serpollet steamer in. And I fear, Mr. Dunstable, that we have no photographs of you either. That's right, Dunstable, Dixon said with a little laugh. All this while you were wrapped up, shall we say, elsewhere. These words were greeted by a general snigger and a louder guffaw from Ponsonby. Charles raised his voice over the laughter. We have, however, managed to apprehend the two men who packaged you. He turned and signalled to Mudd, who was standing beside the door. Constable Lakin, sir, Mudd announced, and opened the door. Lakin, Charles said, as the constable came in, accompanied by a very tall man in brown corduroy pants and rough jerkin, and a boy merely out of his teens. Both had their hands manacled before them. Good of you to come, and who are these gentlemen? Dick Quilp, said the constable, pointing to the tall man, and Fred Codlin. Dunstable stared. Yes, these are the very ones. They came on to me in the alley and hit me on the head. Please tell the company who paid you, the constable ordered. 'Twas them, said the boy, raising his fettered hands to point at Bateman and Ponsonby. That's ridiculous, Ponsonby pulled himself off. I don't know what you're talking about. They paid us 2 shillings each if we jump him, said Quilp darkly. We didn't want to do it, but they argued us over with the money. It's our word against the word of these knaves, Bateman growled. They have no proof. I still got the florin you give me, the boy said, helpfully pulling a 2-shilling piece out of his pocket, holding it out. I drank mine, Quilp said. But ye can ask the barman or the son. He knows how much I spent. "This is all nonsense, of course, Harry," Bateman said nervously to a glowering, red-faced Dunstable. "I swear on my mother's grave I had nothing." Ponsonby was calmer. "Even if we did arrange a little joke," he drawled, "you ought to be grateful. If you hadn't been otherwise occupied, Harry, you would have been in the Daimler with Albrecht. You could have been as dead as he is now." Dunstable was about to reply, but Charles interrupted, changing the subject and redirecting their attention, Kate thought, with a very great adroitness. "Ah, yes, the unfortunate Herr Albrecht," Charles said soberly and threw another slide onto the screen. "This, gentlemen, is the scene of the crash that killed him. Most appalling sight, you will agree." Kate winced when she saw the slide, which showed Bradford's Daimler with its front end smashed against the trees, its rear end in the air, and wreckage strewn uphill behind it. "Terrible, terrible," Dunstable muttered. "Poor Albrecht," Bateman sighed, "to lose his life in such a way." "Oh, Lord," whispered Dixon, completely white-faced. "You see, Harry," Ponsonby said triumphantly, "it is just as I said. If you'd been in that car when it went into that ravine, you wouldn't be sitting here right now." "What I want to know," Rolls said in a wondering tone, "is why it didn't burn. With those hot tube igniters and a full tank of petrol, the thing should have gone off like a juiced bomb." "Unbelievable as it seems," Charles remarked, "Herr Albrecht failed to top off the tank. At the time of the crash, the car was virtually empty of fuel. It could not have made it past the bridge." There was a moment's pause as the company studied the slide on the screen, and Kate reflected with some pride on her husband's thoroughness as a detective and with relief on the knowledge that Lawrence could be excused of any wrongdoing. "I understand that you have investigated the crash in some detail, Sheridan," the doctor said. "What have you been able to learn of the cause?" "Several interesting facts," Charles said, and signaled to Mudd again. The butler stepped out of the room, and when he returned he was carrying 3 objects on a large and ornate silver tray. He put the tray on the table at the side of the room and turned up the gas lights. Charles went to the table and picked up the leather-covered wooden brake. "I'm sure you will recognize this brake block," he said, holding it up. "It comes from the left rear wheel of the ill-fated Daimler. The car crashed because someone smeared this block with grease. Albrecht was coming down the hill at a speed probably close to 20 miles an hour. When he attempted to apply the brake, the car spun out of control and went into the ravine." "Someone smeared the brake with grease!" Dunstable exclaimed incredulously. "Yes," Charles said. "That is what Albrecht himself said just before he died in Dr. Bassett's surgery. He picked up the crockery pot from the tray, and this is the grease that was used, although it did not come from this container." "You're speaking very positively," Dixon growled. "How do you know that?" "I shall show you, Mr. Dixon," Charles said, and went on. "But before I do, I wish to point out that the person who applied the grease to the brake left a smear of it on the fender." He picked up a third object, the dented fender, and displayed its dusty underside. "He left a fingerprint as well." "There you go again, Sheridan," said Harry Hodgson in a tone of scornful amusement. "Riding your favorite hobby horse, fingerprints, 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 always fingerprints. Are we to hear of nothing else?" "So Charles is persuaded," the doctor said, for the elucidation of the group, "that any individual in the world can be identified by his fingerprints." "I've heard that fingerprinting can't be done," Ponsonby said dubiously, "but I read in the Pall Mall Gazette just last week that the Yards has rejected it as a practical matter, primarily on the grounds that such evidence could not be comprehended by the average jury." "I doubt it can be even done," said Bateman, inspecting his fingertips, "or yield any useful information for that matter." There was a rustle as the others made the same inspection. "Oh, but it can be done," Charles protested, "and with excellent practical effect." He dropped a slide into the lantern's upper optical tube, and the top half of the screen was filled with the enlarged image of a fingerprint. "This, gentlemen, is a photograph of the fingerprint on the fender." "What a nuisance," said the coroner, shifting his heavy bulk in the chair. "Wake me when the lecture is over." "I hope to keep you awake this time, Harry," Charles said. Taking a wooden pointer, he strode to the screen. "As you can see, of course, this is a fingerprint like all fingerprints, and it is made up of lines and whorls. This particular print, however," he pointed, "displays a rare double loop, the upper double loop rotating to the left, the lower one to the right." "Rare, is it?" asked the constable with some interest. "Yes, quite rare," Charles said, going back to the projector. "Let me show you several others, and you shall see that there is not a single double loop among them." And leaving the image of the fingerprint atop the screen, he projected 4 prints, one after another, onto the bottom half. "Indeed," said the coroner, sitting up straight, his eyes now wide open. "Not a double loop among them." "But what have we here?" Charles asked, as the fifth print came onto the screen. "Why, bless my soul, I believe it's a match." "A match?" the doctor asked. "You mean you have found another man with the very same fingerprint?" "No, for that would be impossible," Charles said. "Each man's fingerprints are unique. What we see here is another print, but by the same man." He went on to the screen with his pointer. "Here is the same double loop, the rotating to the left, the lower to the right, and here is that odd ridge, and here," he paused, "if I am correct, I believe that there are 8 principal points of comparison between 2 prints. A closer study, of course, may reveal others." "I charge you," said Charles, the coroner said sternly, "to reveal exactly where you obtained the second fingerprint." "Indeed," said the constable, "it could reveal the identity of the man who killed Wilhelm Albrecht." There was a gasp, followed by much nervous shifting and muttering. Charles nodded at Mott, who disappeared and reappeared with another tray, which he placed beside the first. This one bore 9 clear crystal wine goblets. "The print was taken from one of these goblets," Charles said, "each of which, as you can see, is labeled with a name." "And the goblet," the constable said. "Where did you get them?" "These are goblets from which wine was drunk at last night's dinner," Charles said. "They were taken from the dining table and locked in the butler's pantry until this afternoon, when I took them to my laboratory and photographed them." "And the print?" the coroner asked severely. "Whose is it?" "It belongs," Charles said, "to Arthur Dixon." "No!" Dixon cried, rising. "It isn't mine." "I grant you there is a remote possibility of some mischance with the goblets," Charles agreed. He took a leather case from his pocket. "I have here a fingerprint kit, however, and it will take only a moment to obtain your prints and confirm that you are not the man." "That is absurd," Dixon exclaimed. "Fingerprints, I won't stand for it, you hear?" "Then sit down," Dunstable growled crossly, "and don't be an ass." "Yes," Bateman said, "do sit down and be reasonable, old chap. We all want to get to the bottom of this wretched affair so that we can go about our daily business." "Did you do it, Arthur?" asked Ponsonby. "If you did, best fess up, or they'll be hounding the rest of us until the kingdom come." "I didn't do it," Dixon said desperately. "Then perhaps you can explain how the same red grease that appears in the break was also found on your trousers," Charles said. Dixon attempted a laugh. "You are a preposterous fellow, Sheridan. Even if you had found grease in my trousers, you can't possibly know that it was the same grease." But Charles had inserted 2 more slides into his lantern projector. "The one on the top," he said, "is a scraping of the grease taken from the Daimler's fender. On the bottom is a scraping from Mr. Dixon's tweed trousers. As you can see, this particular grease happens to contain distinctive corpuscule of swine's blood, which are clearly evident in both samples. Here at this point, you observe their round shapes, and here again. There's no mistaking the fact that both samples come from the same source. I submit to you, gentlemen, that Mr. Dixon—" "No!" Dixon shouted again. "And you aren't going to frighten me into a confession with this scientific hocus-pocus, Sheridan. Fingerprints and corpuscle, it's all utter nonsense. Nonsense, do you hear me?" "I should think more seriously of this accusation, Mr. Dixon, if I were you," said the constable. "Poppycock," Dixon muttered. "Lunacy done up in scientific jargon. I'm going back to the inn, and the first thing tomorrow to London." The coroner looked pained. "I'm sorry to tell you that I've heard enough evidence to remand you into the constable's custody, Mr. Dixon." He sighed heavily as he heaved himself to his feet. "And I'm even more sorry to say that the matter of Herr Albrecht's death will have to be brought before a coroner's jury." "A jury?" Dixon repeated scornfully. "And what makes you think that a jury of villagers would consider such ludicrous evidence of fingerprints and corpuscles? It's all academic nonsense." "Perhaps," the coroner sighed again, "but the Crown must have a go anyway. Shall we say tomorrow fortnight?"